Difficult Conversations: How to Discuss What Matters Most by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. Picture this. It's late afternoon when your phone rings. It's your buddy Michael, and he sounds panicked. He needs a financial brochure designed and printed by tomorrow morning. His regular designer bailed, and he's in full crisis mode. You're buried in work, but hey, that's what friends are for, right? So you cancel your dinner date, order takeout, and work through the night like some kind of caffeinated zombie. By noon the next day, those beautiful printed brochures are sitting on his desk. You're exhausted but glowing with that warm feeling of being a good friend. Then you drag yourself back to your office and see the voicemail light blinking. It's Michael, and the message goes something like this. "Well, you really screwed this one up." Your stomach drops. He continues, disappointment dripping from every word. "The earnings chart isn't clear enough. It's slightly off. It's a disaster. This is an important client. I assume you'll fix it right away. Give me a call." Feel that? That mix of anger, hurt, and complete disbelief? You call him back, with your heart pounding in your chest. The conversation that follows is awkward, tense, and leaves you feeling like you just got hit by a truck. You agree to redo everything, hanging up feeling completely defeated. Months later, things still feel weird between you two. You keep replaying that conversation, wondering what went so horribly wrong. Sound familiar? Maybe your story wasn't about a brochure. Maybe it was finally asking for that raise you deserve, ending a relationship that wasn't working, calling out someone's disrespectful comment, or just trying to have an honest talk with your parents about something important. These are the conversations that make our stomachs churn, the ones we rehearse in the shower, the ones that keep us staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Here's something wild. Every single one of these nightmare conversations, no matter what they're about, follows the exact same hidden pattern. And once you can see that pattern, you can stop stumbling through these moments with dread and start navigating them with actual confidence. Today, we're unpacking a game-changing book that came out of the Harvard Negotiation Project, Difficult Conversations, by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. This isn't just another self-help book gathering dust on your shelf. It's basically a survival guide for being human. By the time we're done, you'll understand the 3 hidden conversations happening beneath every difficult talk, and you'll have a practical framework to turn painful confrontations into productive discussions. This is one of those skills that'll pay dividends for the rest of your life, so let's dive in. We all face this impossible choice when we know a tough conversation needs to happen. Do we bring it up, or just let it slide? If we stay quiet, we feel like a doormat. Our frustration builds. We start resenting the other person and ourselves for being such a coward. But if we speak up, we're terrified everything might blow up in our faces. We might hurt them, they might attack us. The whole relationship could go down in flames. So we try to find some magical third option. We convince ourselves we can be so tactful, so smooth, so perfectly diplomatic, that everything will just work out. The authors have a perfect name for this fantasy, trying to throw a diplomatic hand grenade. But here's the thing about hand grenades. Wrapping them in pretty paper doesn't change what they are. There's no gentle way to make something explode. The authors reveal that this entire impossible dilemma is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what difficult conversations are really about. We think our job is to deliver a message, to prove they're wrong, to make them change, to finally set them straight. But the real breakthrough, the game-changing insight of this entire book, is to completely flip your purpose. Your goal shouldn't be to persuade, it should be to learn. To transform a battle of competing messages into what they call a learning conversation. And to pull that off, you first need to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. The authors discovered something fascinating. No matter what you're arguing about, every difficult conversation is actually 3 distinct conversations happening simultaneously. Master all 3, and you can handle anything. The first is the what happened conversation. This is usually what we think we're arguing about. The facts of the situation. Who said what? Who did what? Who's right? Who's wrong? And whose fault is it? In our opening story, Jack and Michael were stuck arguing about whether the chart was actually a disaster or just a minor issue. Classic, what happened conversation. But here's where we make our first massive mistake. The authors call it the truth assumption. We assume we're right and the other person is wrong. Our whole perspective is built on this shaky foundation. You drive too fast. Your comment was inappropriate. The brochure is perfectly fine. The problem? Difficult conversations are almost never about objective facts. They're about our perceptions, our interpretations, and what we value. They're not about what is true. They're about what matters to us. Jack and Michael both agreed the chart was slightly off. They were really arguing about whether it was a big deal. So the first shift is to stop trying to prove you're right and start trying to understand each other's stories. Your mission becomes exploring rather than arguing. How do they see this situation? And how do you see it? You don't have to agree with their version or abandon your own. You just need to understand it. The authors call this adopting the and stance. It's a simple but powerful idea. Two stories can be true at the same time. I can be hurt and frustrated, and you can genuinely believe you were being helpful. My story is valid, and your story is valid. It's not either/or. It's both. The second mistake we make in the what happened conversation is what they call the intention invention. We assume we know what the other person meant, when we absolutely don't. And worse, we usually assume they had bad intentions. When a friend shows up late, we don't think, maybe they stopped to help someone having a heart attack. We think, what a jerk. They don't respect my time. We feel hurt, so we jump to the conclusion that they intended to hurt us. The authors share this perfect example about Lori and Leo. At a party, Lori reaches for ice cream, and her boyfriend Leo says, "Lori, why don't you lay off the ice cream?" Lori, who's sensitive about her weight, feels completely humiliated. She snaps at him, "You have this need to control me and embarrass me in front of our friends." Leo looks genuinely confused. He says, "I wasn't trying to hurt you. You said you were on a diet, and I was just trying to help." Lori made the first mistake. She assumed Leo's intention was to humiliate her. But Leo makes the second mistake. He thinks that because his intentions were good, Lori has no right to feel hurt. He's so focused on defending his intentions that he completely misses her pain. He doesn't hear what she's actually saying. He just hears an accusation. The solution is to separate intention from impact. Recognize that your assumption about their intentions is just a guess, a hypothesis, not a fact. Share the impact their actions had on you, and then, with genuine curiosity, ask about what they actually intended. Lori could have said, "When you commented on the ice cream in front of everyone, I felt humiliated. What were you thinking in that moment?" That opens a door to understanding, not a fight. The third mistake in the what happened conversation is what they call the blame frame. When something goes wrong, our first instinct is to figure out whose fault it is. The company loses a client, and everyone starts playing this ruthless game of blame roulette. As long as the blame doesn't land on us, we're in the clear. Blame is all about judging and punishing, and it always creates defensiveness. Think about two kids fighting in the back seat. When you ask who started it, what do you hear? "She hit me first, but he called me a baby." They're defending themselves from judgment. The authors push us to shift from blame to contribution. Blame looks backward to judge. Contribution looks forward to understand and change. The question isn't, whose fault is it, but rather, how did we each contribute to this situation? Think about the story of the botched presentation. Your assistant packed the wrong storyboards, and you're furious. It was obviously her fault. A conversation focused on blame would involve you telling her how she messed up. She'd apologize, feel terrible, and you'd both move on, but nothing would actually change. A contribution conversation sounds completely different. You might start by saying, "Let's walk through how this happened. I'm guessing we both played a part." Your assistant might then reveal, "Well, the last time I asked which boards you wanted, you got really annoyed because you were busy. So this time, I was trying to stay out of your way." And you might realize, "You're right. I am often short with people when I'm stressed. And I usually double-check my briefcase. but this time I was so overwhelmed I just forgot. Suddenly, you're not the victim and the villain. You're two people caught in a system. You were unapproachable. She made an assumption. You both contributed. Now you can actually fix the problem. You can agree that she should always check with you, regardless of your mood. And you can work on being less irritable under pressure. This is how real change actually happens. And that brings us to the second of the 3 hidden conversations, the feelings conversation. Difficult conversations aren't just about feelings. The authors say they are, at their very core, about feelings. Having a difficult conversation without talking about feelings is like staging an opera without the music. You might follow the plot, but you'll completely miss the point. But we usually try our hardest to keep feelings out of it. We think feelings are messy, unprofessional, or just plain dangerous. If I share my feelings, I might get hurt. What if they dismiss them? Or what if I hurt their feelings, then I'll have to deal with that? It just seems easier to stick to the facts. But here's the thing about unexpressed feelings. They don't just disappear, they leak into the conversation. They show up in our tone of voice, our body language, our sarcasm. Or they explode. We don't blow up because we express our feelings too often. We explode because we express them too rarely. Like shaking a soda can, the pressure builds until it's a complete mess. Unexpressed feelings also completely block our ability to listen. It's really hard to be curious about someone else's perspective when your own internal voice is screaming, "I'm so angry," or "I feel so disrespected." So what do? First, we need to actually find our feelings. And this is trickier than it sounds. We often translate our feelings into judgments, assumptions, and accusations. A statement like, "You are so thoughtless," isn't a feeling. It's a judgment. The actual feeling underneath might be, "I feel hurt," or "I feel unimportant." The first step is learning to identify the real emotion. A simple trick: start your sentences with "I feel." It forces you to name what's actually going on inside. But you don't just word vomit whatever you find. You have to negotiate with your feelings. Your feelings are based on your perceptions. As your understanding of the what happened, conversation changes. As you get curious about their story, their real intentions, and their contribution, your feelings will naturally start to shift. Your anger might soften. Your hurt might become more manageable. When you do express them, share the full picture. Don't just say, "I'm angry." Try something like, "When you did that, I felt angry, but I also felt hurt and a little confused." This complexity invites them into a real conversation, not a fight. Finally, you absolutely must acknowledge their feelings. This isn't optional. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to show them you hear them. When someone shares a feeling, they're asking invisible questions. Are my feelings okay? Do you understand? Do you care? A simple acknowledgement, "That sounds really frustrating," or "I can see why you'd be hurt," answers those questions with a yes. It shows them they've been heard. And only then can they actually start to hear you. This brings us to the third and perhaps most subtle and powerful conversation, the identity conversation. This is the conversation happening inside your own head about what this situation means about who you are. Asking for a raise isn't just about money. It's about whether you're valued and competent. Admitting a mistake isn't just about the error. It's about whether you're a good person. Breaking up with someone isn't just about the relationship. It's about whether you're cruel. Difficult conversations shake our sense of identity. And when our identity gets shaken, the authors say we can have an identity quake. We completely lose our balance. We might feel a surge of anxiety or anger. We might stammer, get super defensive, or just completely shut down. We stop being able to listen or think clearly because we're too busy having a full-blown private crisis. The biggest reason our identity is so fragile is that we tend to think in extremes. I'm either competent or incompetent. I'm a good person or a bad person. There's no middle ground. This leaves us with only 2 terrible options when we get negative feedback. The first is denial. If I think of myself as brilliant and mistake-free, and my boss tells me my work was sloppy, I have to reject that feedback to protect my self-image. My boss has no idea what he's talking about. He just doesn't appreciate my genius. Denial takes enormous energy, and eventually our story becomes impossible to maintain. The second option is exaggeration. If I'm not perfect, then I must be completely worthless. My boss says my work was sloppy, and my internal voice says, I'm a total fraud. I knew it all along. I'm probably getting fired. I'll never amount to anything. We let one piece of feedback define our entire existence. The solution is to ground your identity. And this starts with ditching all-or-nothing thinking and accepting your own complexity. You need to adopt the and stance for yourself. You are not perfect, and you are not worthless. You're a mix of good and bad intentions, wise and foolish actions. You're a work in progress. There are 3 specific things the authors say we need to accept about ourselves. First, you will make mistakes. Accepting this doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you secure. People who can admit mistakes are seen as confident enough not to need to be perfect. Second, your intentions are complicated. You're not always motivated by pure angelic intentions. Sometimes there's selfishness, fear, or a desire to avoid conflict mixed in. Being honest with yourself about this makes it much easier to stay balanced when someone questions your motives. And third, you have contributed to the problem. This is often the hardest to swallow, especially when you feel like the victim. But remember, contribution isn't about blame, it's about empowerment. You may not be able to change other people's contributions, but you can always change your own. And by changing your behavior, you change the entire dynamic. So you've done the internal work. You've walked through the 3 conversations in your own mind. You understand your story, and you're curious about theirs. You've identified your feelings. You've grounded your identity. Now comes the practical question. How do you actually start this conversation? The authors offer a brilliant and simple technique. Begin from the third story. The third story is the version a neutral observer would tell. It's a description of the problem as a difference between you, without any judgment. Let's say you and your roommate disagree about dirty dishes. Your story is, you're a slob. His story is, you're a neurotic, neat freak. A fight is guaranteed if you start from either of those places. The third story would be, you and I have different ideas about when to do the dishes. That's it. It's just a description of the difference, and it's something you can both agree on. You could start the conversation by saying, it seems like we have different approaches to handling the dishes. I'd like to understand your perspective and share mine, and see if we can figure out something that works for both of us. You've described the problem from neutral ground, and you've invited them to be your partner in solving it. You haven't blamed them, you haven't attacked them. You've made it safe for them to engage. Once the conversation is rolling, your job is to lead. This doesn't mean controlling it. It means guiding it toward a learning conversation, even if the other person is stuck in blame or attack mode. You do this through 3 powerful moves. The first is reframing. You take what they say and translate it into the more helpful framework of the 3 conversations. If they say, this is all your fault, you reframe from blame to contribution. I'm sure I've played a part in this, and I think we both probably have. Instead of focusing on fault, I'd like to understand how we got here together. If they say, you were trying to hurt me, you reframe to separate intent from impact. I can see that what I did hurt you, and that wasn't my intention. Can you tell me more about how you felt? The second move is the most important of all, listening. No matter what's happening, it's always the right time to listen. When they get emotional, listen. When they attack you, listen to understand what's behind the attack. You cannot move the conversation forward until they feel heard. And they won't feel heard until you listen with genuine curiosity. And the third move, for when things are really stuck, is to name the dynamic. You make the problem in the conversation itself the topic. I'm noticing that every time I try to share my perspective, you interrupt me. I'm feeling frustrated because I don't feel heard. I really want to understand what's so important to you. And then, I'd like the chance to finish my thought. Naming what's happening can clear the air and get things back on track. Ultimately, by understanding each other's stories, feelings, and identity concerns, you open the door to real problem solving. You can brainstorm creative options that meet both your needs. You can look for fair standards to resolve your differences. And even if you can't reach an agreement, you will have handled the conversation in a way that preserves and often strengthens the relationship, because you've sent the most important message of all. Even when we disagree, I care about you, I care about your perspective, and I want to understand. And that's the foundation of every healthy relationship that lasts. When you first encounter the ideas in difficult conversations, it can feel a bit overwhelming. 3 conversations. The and stance. Contribution, reframing. It seems like a lot to juggle when you're already stressed. But here's the beautiful thing about this book. It's not about memorizing a checklist of tactics. It's about a fundamental shift in your entire approach. It's about moving from knowing to learning, from certainty to curiosity. The most profound lesson for me is that difficult conversations are rarely about what they appear to be about on the surface. We think we're arguing about the dishes, or the budget, or who was supposed to pick up the kids. But we're really having a conversation about respect, or love, or competence. We're wrestling with feelings of being unappreciated, or our fear of being seen as a failure. This book gives us a map to that hidden territory. It teaches us to look underneath the words, to find the real meaning. And in doing so, it gives us power. Not power over the other person, but power over ourselves. The power to choose our response instead of just reacting. The power to stay grounded when our identity gets shaken. The power to transform a potential disaster into an opportunity for connection and growth. This isn't easy. It takes practice. It takes courage to be vulnerable, to admit your part in a problem, to share how you're really feeling. But the payoff is huge. It's the difference between relationships that are brittle and constantly on the edge of breaking, and relationships that are resilient, honest, and can weather the inevitable conflicts that come with being human. So how can you start putting this into practice today? Here are 3 simple things you can try. First, just observe. The next time you find yourself in even a minor disagreement, don't try to fix anything. Just listen to the conversation in your head. Try to spot the 3 conversations. What's the what happened story you're telling yourself? What are you feeling? And what does this situation say about your identity? Just becoming aware is a huge first step. Second, practice the and stance in a low-stakes situation. The next time someone has a different opinion, instead of saying but, try saying and. For example, I see your point that we should save money, and I also think this experience would be a valuable investment. Notice the shift it creates, both in you and in the other person. It moves you from opposition to collaboration. Third, try starting one small, slightly difficult conversation from the third story, maybe with a parent, a friend, or a sibling. Instead of launching into your complaint, start by describing the difference. It seems like you and I have different ideas about my curfew. I'd love to understand your concerns and also share my perspective. See how that changes the entire tone of what follows. These aren't just communication techniques, they're a way of being. They're a commitment to understanding before being understood, to choosing learning over fighting, and to recognizing the complex, imperfect, and shared humanity in all of us. That was a summary of Difficult Conversations by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. We've certainly covered the big ideas today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful city. The real magic happens when you actually walk the streets yourself. It's in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or phrase resonates with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has struck a chord, I encourage you to grab a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you approach every important relationship in your life. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas in the world's most impactful books, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.